Hi, Rob McIver here. This is a briefing on the Global Adventist Pastors Survey, designed especially for executive secretaries at division, union and conference levels of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and also the directors of the Ministerial Association at each of those levels. There are certain questions that keep coming up as I talk to people about the Global Adventist Pastors Survey, and I thought it would be appropriate to structure this briefing around some of those questions. For example, who wants to know? Wow. What are they trying to find out? Where did you get your questions from, Rob? And there's some practical implications. Have you thought about some of them? Who gets to see the results? Especially am I. The people I'm talking to really want to know if they can see the results. What languages is the survey available from? And when do we get started? First then, who wants to know? Well, the survey is being commissioned by the Future Plans Working Group. It's a committee that's made up of the General Conference President, the General Conference Secretary, the General Conference Treasurer, and all the Vice Presidents, as well as other key members. The Secretary of the Committee is Dr. David Trim, the Director of the General Conference Office of Archive Statistics and Research. And this committee uses the data gathered from surveys as one of the important inputs in their strategic planning for the future of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So you can see this and the other surveys that they conduct have an important impact on the global church. The General Conference Office of Archive Statistics and Research has the task of managing this survey and the others that are commissioned by the Future Plans Working Group. And you can see the names and photos of the research team that has been put together to design and implement this survey. We work out of the Scripture, Spirituality and Society Research Centre at Avondale University. So what is the survey aimed at trying to find out? Well, the research team was given the task to design and implement a pastoral survey focused on the following areas: the spiritual life of pastors, pastors' attitude to the Adventist Church's fundamental beliefs, their attitude to church authority, the Adventist message they preach, their priorities, their attitude to discipleship, and so on. So where did the questions come from that ended up in the survey? Well, a lot of them came from the 2013 Global Adventist Pastors Survey. This was the last survey conducted amongst Adventist pastors on a global scale, and we wanted to reuse as many of those questions as we could because we want to see what's changed over that time period. Now, here are some questions that were in that survey that we have reused in the current survey. For example, question 25. In your own ministry, which do you emphasize? Care for spiritual needs, training for outreach, and where do you fit on that continuum? In your own ministry, what do you spend more time doing? Ministering to members, conducting outreach. Another set of questions comes from research that has been conducted in ministers and clergy generally. There's actually an interesting summary of this research found on pastoralcareinc.com/statistics. And so while we haven't used the exact wording from that website, here are some of the questions that relate to the more general research on clergy. I know that God has called me to be a pastor. I feel that I'm in the place that God has called me to. We also consulted the General Conference Ministerial Association team, and they urged us that as well as asking questions that were interesting to administrators, that we allowed the pastors an opportunity to express what was in their own mind. So here are some questions that came from those conversations. Question 1. Write down the 2 most fulfilling things that you experience in your work as a minister. And question 3. How much of your work as a church pastor helps you fulfill your own call of God to full-time ministry? Other questions came from the research brief itself. For example, question 19. In the last 12 months, approximately how many times have you preached on the following topics in your local churches? The experience of salvation, life, death, resurrection of Jesus, the Trinity, the Holy Spirit, etc. So we go down many of the fundamental beliefs. And just as a note, even though the survey is rather long, this kind of question can be answered with great efficiency. It only takes a few seconds to answer each element of this grid. The list of questions was reviewed several times by the Future Plans Working Group, and they suggested other questions that should be added. For example, in the list of topics that were preached, we added a topic of stewardship and Adventist education. And question 35, our local churches promote the World Church's mission offering. We included a couple of questions from other surveys commissioned by the Future Plans Working Group. For example, question 51D, the dead have powers to communicate with and influence the living. Yes, that has got an interesting background in the Global Members Survey. And question 33, during the COVID-19 pandemic, what happened to worship services at the churches that you pastored? Well, I adapted the wording a bit. My church continued to meet face-to-face, etc. We also drew some questions from other major research surveys, one conducted by the Pew Forum, one called the Australian Church Life Survey, and commonly used scales such as Quest, intrinsic, extrinsic, religious orientation, etc. So what's the result? Wow, it's a very long survey. So what have we done? Well, alas, we'd like everybody to answer every question, and that has remained an option. So in the survey, you're given an option to say, if you want to answer all of the questions, choose this route. But most people doing the survey will do one of three branches. And in breaking the survey up into three branches, which consist of some common questions and then some unique questions to each branch, we have been able to reduce the survey to 100 items. It's still rather long, but much better than asking all of the questions to everybody. Now, this has a very practical outcome. To get sensible statistics and to be able to report in a way that keeps the survey responses anonymous, we need between 200 and 300 surveys from each reporting units. I'm going to come back to that observation, but there's your basic background. Not everybody's going to answer all the questions, and if we've got three branches and we need maybe 50 or 60 answers to each branch, we're going to need a total of 200 to 300 surveys. Now, the ideal way to conduct this sort of survey is to find a room full of pastors and give them a paper survey and say you can leave when you're finished, okay? And that way, you get out about 95% of the people participating. Well, there are several factors that have made that very difficult, not least of which has been the recent experience of COVID and the very small numbers of gathering of large groups of pastors together in one place, especially in the time period that we need to conduct the survey. So we have been forced to use SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey has many advantages, by the way. There are no transcription errors because the participant puts their answers directly into SurveyMonkey, and we don't have to wait for the survey data to be entered. It's there, it's live, and we can get near instant access to the survey data. It does have this huge disadvantage though. It is challenging to get a good participation rate. This graph illustrates the principal challenge of using SurveyMonkey. It shows the participation rates for another survey I'm conducting for the General Conference among Adventist teachers in the Euro-Asian division. It's part of a survey project that goes to all divisions. There are 6 key moments in this graph, each corresponding to an email requesting that Adventist teachers participate in this survey. The first email came from Elder Wilson himself, and it requested that they participate in the survey, and you can see as a response to that request, 5% responded. We sent a reminder above the email from Elder Wilson, and we got a further 5 or maybe 6% respond. I'm not showing these results because it comes from a division where we had a poor outcome. In fact, the education director of this division, Ivan, was very supportive of the research, worked behind the scenes, and for our third email, we got Ivan himself to write. And he wrote an impassioned plea for people to participate. And as you can see, that was quite effective, about another 15%. We reminded people about that email, then we sent 2 further emails. And you can see after all this reminding and after the enthusiastic support and promotion from Ivan, we got over 25% participation. Well, if you're a glass half full person, that's not bad. But to get there, we had to work very hard, and we'd like even greater percentages in our pastoral survey because we actually have less pastors to survey. Now, this has a very practical outcome on sample size. We are only asking pastors and local Adventist churches to participate. And we've broken the survey into 3 branches. And we're trying to achieve 200 to 300 survey responses from each area. Now you've seen what happens if we promote the survey well and work hard. We get maybe a third or a quarter of those who are asked to actually participate. So to get our 200 to 300 surveys, we need to ask 800 to 1,000 pastors. We hope to report not only at division level, but union level. And there are many unions in the world where there will be this number of pastors that we can ask to participate. But what happens if there is a smaller number of pastors in a particular union? Well, if there are several unions in one country, they can be naturally grouped together. So, for example, there are about 300 pastors in local churches in Germany. They happen to be in several unions, but if we cluster the unions together and we get a good response rate, then we will be able to report at, say, country level. There are some divisions where the number of pastors is small enough that we may have to report at division level. But in any event, in most parts of the world church, we're going to have to be asking all pastors in local churches to participate. Let's talk about the very practical issue of how we invite people to participate in the survey. I've listed 4 methods here: paper-based, email, link, and a hybrid. Paper-based surveys can be very effective. You find a large group of ministers in one place, especially if it's a set of meetings. You arrange for the last part of one meeting to be devoted to the survey. You distribute the survey, you introduce it, and you say, when you finish that, you can leave. And that has tremendous advantages. It has the highest completion rate, probably, of any of the methods. There are some disadvantages, though. The biggest of these is cost. Especially if you're running a very large survey, printing thousands of surveys and then processing them by scanning them or getting the data entered manually can be very time intensive and very expensive. With everybody's recent COVID experience, large meetings are quite rare, and to have a group of ministers meeting in the year 2022 or at most January or February 2023 is not entirely likely. So we need to think of other methods. SurveyMonkey has an excellent method of using email addresses to contact potential participants. If you provide the research team with a set of email addresses, and I suggest you arrange them by union, so we have another check of which union a particular response comes from, we can use SurveyMonkey to send out an invitation to all of those pastors on that email list. And here is the really helpful function. When we send a reminder out, and we will have to do that at least 6 times, SurveyMonkey only sends reminders to those people who have yet to do the survey. So that is a big plus. There's a couple of disadvantages though, and here is the first one. Some countries have privacy legislation that prohibits us from doing this, and I have listed some of them here. We have the 2 European divisions, we have the North American division, and there are some other divisions where it is true as well. Maybe not for the whole division, but certainly for countries within the division. In places where you cannot provide us with emails, we can provide you with separate links for each union in the division. So in places where we're not allowed to use email addresses, we can provide links. The survey team will provide a link to each union, and then the division or the union will be responsible for contacting the pastors and asking them to click on the link and then fill out the survey. This has a significant advantage because we can make sure the link will take your participant directly to the most appropriate language for that union. Participants can still change language, but they will start in the language that they need. One disadvantage of the emails is they always open in English, and the participant has to use the drop-down menu to find the language that they would like to work in. Oh, there's a couple of disadvantages. Not least is the fact that you need to send out the reminder emails, and here's the biggest disadvantage. This probably has the lowest participation rate of any particular method of collecting data. Well, is there a way to use links and still get good return rates? Well, I was talking this over with Ray Allen of Adventist World Radio, and he came up with an excellent suggestion. What he did is he set up a date and invited everybody that worked in Adventist World Radio across Africa to join him at a certain date and time. They all met together, and you can see here a screenshot of the result. We have a very wide representation across many countries and separate divisions, and they all were able to start the survey at the same time. And in the chat room, separate links were provided to the English, Spanish, and Portuguese versions of the survey. Everybody started at the same time, and just as with handing out a paper-based surveys, the participation rate was very high. I was pretty pleased with this result, and I was happily reporting it to Dwayne McBride and Peter Chinchala at Andrews University. And Dwayne smiled and says, well, Rob, yes, we've discovered doing that is by far the best way to collect good data. You go to a room where there's a gathering of students or pastors or whoever you're trying to get the survey, you introduce the survey, and if the internet connection is good, they can all log on and start it together. And that gives a very good participation rate. So in many ways, this would be my preferred method of collecting data. Gather a group of pastors in a room with good internet and get them starting the survey all at the same time. Or if you have a scattered group of pastors or it's not possible to meet together in the time interval that's needed, set up a Zoom meeting and again, start the survey together, and then a good participation rate will result. Now, when I'm asking people to participate in sermons, one of the questions they always ask is, well, will I see the data? And you can hear a little chagrin in their voice. They get to answer all kinds of surveys and nobody reports back to them what was found. Well, I have great news for you. I am committed, and the research team is committed to making the survey results available to those that participated. So as a matter of course, we will be providing reports back to the Future Plans Working Group and the Division Secretariat and the Division Ministerial Association. As well as that, we will be publishing the results in academic articles and books that are available through Amazon.com. And I think we have a good track record in this regard. For example, in the survey of teachers that we did in the North American Division and the South Pacific Division, we published 2 separate books. And if you want to see the kind of reporting that we do, you're welcome to email me. And if you're at division or union level, I will happily provide you a free copy of one or other or even both of these books, so you can see how we handle the data. Now, in both divisions, there were a couple of sensitive matters that came out of the data, and I consulted with both divisions as to how best to report that data, and we did report it, and we reported it in a sensitive manner, I believe. And if there's anything really interesting that comes up in your data, it's highly likely I'm going to be following the same procedure. So we will be publishing the results. Now, the survey is available in several translations: English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish, and I've listed them separately because they are used in several divisions, but Bulgarian, Chinese, etc. And this is only the list of translations that are available on the day that I'm recording this briefing, which is the 9th of September 2022. I'm sure there will be some other translations available. Now, I have a treat for you. Well, can I show you something? Now, when you open the survey, you will see the first thing I do is suggest that if you wish to change the language, you go to the top right-hand corner and you use the drop-down menu. And let me illustrate this. This is opened in English. And if I wanted to change it to Spanish, for example, I click on the drop-down menu and there it is in Spanish. And I can go through the rest of the survey in Spanish. Or I might want to do it in Chinese. Or, well, there's lots of options there. And there will be some more that will be available by the time you are watching this video. Now, what does this mean in terms of being able to implement the survey as of this date? Well, I have suggested, say, if I'm looking at the South Pacific Division, and I happen to know a bit about that, we have got some French-speaking areas and some English-speaking areas, and we have both of those languages available. So I have said, yes, we can go ahead and use those translations. The EUD is probably ready to go ahead. They have provided us translations in Bulgarian, Czech, French, German, Portuguese, Romanian, and Spanish, and so on. You can go down the list, find your division, look at the list of languages to see if you agree with me that we've covered the minimum that we need for your division. And sometimes in the right-hand column, you'll see that I'm waiting on a couple of languages. That shouldn't stop us collecting surveys from those parts of your division where we do have languages that will work for you. And by the time you see this video, I'm sure that several of those languages will have been implemented. So, when will data collection begin? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I was able to meet with the division level directors of the Ministerial Association. And the day prior to recording this video, I was able to meet with the ASTAR advisory, and on that advisory are all of the division level executive secretaries. So with this amount of briefing, I think we are in a position to begin data collection pretty much straight away, and as soon as you give us the list of email addresses of pastors or let us know that you require a link. Do you want to preview the survey? Well, yes, that is possible. I'm a little bit nervous about distributing the link to a preview of the survey too widely because I don't want somebody who thinks they are filling out a proper survey to fill this out instead, only to find that they've wasted their time. But if you still want a preview of the survey, which will enable you to answer the questions to see what the survey does, which branch it takes you to, and so on, but will not record your answers, just email me at rob.mciver@avondale.edu.au and I will happily send you the link. Now, where can you find more information? Hey, I'm glad you asked. If you go to the Avondale website, avondale.edu.au, and once there, choose Research, go down Scripture, Spirituality and Society Research Centre, our projects, you will see Global Adventist Pastors Survey, and if you click on that, you will find a letter about the Pastors Survey from Elder Ted Wilson and a FAQ document, the Frequently Asked Questions. Now, by the time you get to see this page, it will be populated with FAQ sheets from each of the languages that the survey is available in. And we will also provide a link to this video on this webpage. Let me finish by saying a huge thank you. This is important research. It's important to the Global Adventist Church, and it's also important to your division, your union, and your conference. It will give you a good insight into the thinking and practices of your own pastoral team. So, thank you so much for your help. Without your help, this survey would just not be possible to implement. With your help, we can get excellent data for you and the wider church. Thank you.